Okay, so Ro, this is the second part of the video. I'll keep this one really short. The image that you're looking at on the screen is just a Renaissance art piece. The artist is not really known because it was really produced by a workshop, the workshop of Robert Campen. This was likely in the area of the Netherlands, so this would have been the Northern Renaissance. You can tell the art's a little bit different in the Northern Renaissance for a few, particular reasons. If you look at the middle part of the scene, and this is an artwork that is a triptych, it would actually be standing up almost like a three-part frame on top of something like a mantle area, and it was paid for by patrons who are actually in the painting. The couple all the way on the left that are walking into the scene, this is the couple that actually purchased the work of art. But the main scene is really in the middle of this painting, and it's a very similar scene to before, where it's actually religious content. And we wouldn't think that kind of at first glance. Maybe with the angel in it you might notice that, but the girl on the right in the red dress kind of looks like somebody who's sitting in her home reading a book, but there's a couple of clues that this is not really a typical scene. So the thing to note is this is a painting that's loaded with humanism. This is definitely a girl that is, looks like a human being. It's not really somebody that looks abstract or in a halo or anything like that, but we do get a sense that she kind of has a human look, but we know that she is meant to be a divine figure. In one way, it's a little hard to see, but there's like a little angel that's coming in, flying from the window, and also the angel that's sitting next to her, that there's a scene of importance that's about to happen. So this is supposed to be Mary, who's going to find out that she's going to be the mother of Jesus. And so this scene, has a whole bunch of religious content in it. But some of the things that you might note is, the table looks a little weird. It's kind of positioned that you can't really sit at it. It's kind of, awkwardly put in here, and the roundness of the table has very sharp lines. It almost looks like an octagon type of shape. There's also the women's dresses. The folds of the dresses have very, very sharp lines, and that's like a standout thing from the Northern Renaissance. It's one of those things that the Northern Renaissance artists did a little bit differently. They played a lot with color, so we get the color and the depth in the room comes not only from the weird kind of perspective that they're playing with here, but also the light. If you look at the red dress, you can kind of see, where the woman's, kind of legs are because of the way that the light is leaning against her. So there's a lot of maybe art innovation that's going on. In the north, there was also some use of oil paints, and oil paints tended to be very rich in color. So you get very deep colors from Renaissance art in the north, and a little bit different with maybe more frescoes in which is like painting on wet plaster in Italy. So again, this is kind of just an example of some of the Northern Renaissance art. This is a work of art that's actually not that far from us. It's located at the Cloisters in New York City, or New York, and that's about the size of it, just to give you a sense. And then lastly, this is the School of Athens, and there in class we did watch a video clip from Smart History, the School of Athens. It's two art historians who described this, but I know that you did Raphael for your Renaissance thinker, so you probably have a good sense of this. But you can really see in this work of art humanism, because you're really looking at not a divine image anymore. You're looking at people who would have been learned men of the classical era, who are kind of standing around the School of Athens in groups, talking about a variety of different topics. It seems almost to be like a free-for-all kind of thinking space, people working on a variety of things. But you also have Plato and Aristotle in the middle of the painting. Great deal of perspective. This is using linear perspective and vanishing point. So we have a clear sense of that there's depth in this painting. This is a fresco that Raphael did, and it's part of like a set of 4 areas of knowledge, and this is meant to represent philosophy. But you can see in the background a great deal of classicism. Certainly this looks like kind of Roman style classical architecture. You get these like vaulted areas, and you see the figures in the back. There are some Greek gods in the back, so kind of a mixture of some classical elements, and of course it's called the School of Athens, but certainly the images and the facial expressions and the people are also meant to kind of be allegorical. They fit with some of the Renaissance people of the time, and so like you noted in your paper, Raphael put himself in the painting. So that's kind of an idea, and I think we probably in class also looked at the Mona Lisa. This is a Leonardo da Vinci, also of the time period, of the High Renaissance. One of the things that, of course, everybody notices about this painting, it's definitely a portrait, kind of becomes very popular in the Renaissance. So these ideas of celebrating the human condition, more and more people are going to access this idea of a portrait, but you also have very, very interesting ways of getting perspective, not only linear perspective or atmospheric perspective, which is kind of the depth of the sky, kind of using a great deal of ways to kind of make the sky look as if it's much further back, and the things in the back of the painting looking much more distant. But there's also a great deal of shading in her face and shading due to the light. So here Leonardo is using chiaroscuro and sfumato, kind of a fuzziness to her face to give her that like warm, glowy type of look. So even though she's a human and she's not a divine figure, she's made to look a little bit special. So humanism is kind of going on here. We don't necessarily see vaulted architecture or anything like that, but there's a great deal of classicism in the way that the pose is kind of very, her kind of shape of her shoulders, her hands being folded, very triangular. So there's a great deal of kind of classical symmetry that's organized in this particular painting. You see naturalism in the background, very much like an earthly scene. Even if we can't recognize it, we can kind of get a sense of it being largely kind of a naturalistic type background. And if you've never seen the Mona Lisa up close, it looks like that. It's very, very small. And you might have been in class when we started to talk about this. And some of the other things is just noting, Leonardo Sketches. We talked about these in class a little bit. Some of the ways in which he kind of creates a whole bunch of, sketches to play around with human facial expressions, even exaggerated features. In some cases, they're very grotesque and almost kind of monstrous, and in some cases he toys with the idea of ideal beauty and what that looks like. He also toys with age. He does a sketch of himself as an older man, so a great deal of that. And then we looked at some of those other ones that you worked on in class. Okie doke. Have a good rest of the weekend, and I'll see you in class.